Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dear Professor Robertson-von Trotha, dear Professor Friedrich, dear Professor Pottas, dear colleagues Doris Wedlich and Markus Poplov, dear students and guests, it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the KIT Presidential Committee to this evening that sets the spotlight on Fritz Haber, one of the great chemists of the late 19th and early 20th century, but also one of the most controversially discussed ones. In this regard, the academic year 2018-2019 coincides with a number of anniversaries as it represents the 150th anniversary of Haber's birthday, which was on 9th December 1918. The 100th anniversary of the awarding of the Nobel Prize to him, as well as the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, in which Haber's inventions and Haber himself had engaged in a questionable way. The history of Fritz Haber as a scientist is naturally closely connected to the history of Karlsruher Institute of Technology, since Haber conducted his research in the fields of electrochemistry and physical chemistry for 17 years, from 1894 to 1911 at Technische Hochschule Karlsruhe, which is a precursor institution of KIT. It was here where he invented the so-called Haber-Bosch process, which became a milestone in industrial chemistry and for which he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry a few years later. There's no doubt that the achievements and contributions of Fritz Haber make him one of the most outstanding scientists who ever worked in Karlsruhe. He was an excellent academic teacher and researcher, and he also was an exceptionally gifted innovator. In this regard, he could be seen as a role model for us and our students still today. However, Fritz Haber played also a leading role in developing and weaponizing chlorine and other poisonous gases or toxic gases during World War I. His contributions in this field were so outstanding and so significant that Fritz Haber is considered the father of chemical warfare. Haber was a fervent German patriot. Nationalism and militarism were mainstream credos at the time, both in Germany and also in other European countries. However, there were other views and attitudes too at the time. Contemporaries like Albert Einstein, Hermann Hesse, or Rosa Luxemburg, who, by the way, was murdered exactly 100 years ago on the 15th January 1919, as well as Haber's first wife, Clara Immerwahr, did certainly not support the way he dealt with the ethical dilemma of chemists of his time, which he expressed in his statement, "During peacetime, a scientist belongs to the world, but during wartime, he belongs to his country." It's important that when we commemorate and appreciate Fritz Haber, we engage critically with his work and the effects of his work, as well as with the ambiguity of his personality and the decisions he made. Critical engagement requires a solid basis of information, as well as a discussion from different perspectives and perceptions. This is the aim of today's evening event. I'm very thankful to the Center of Cultural and General Studies at KIT, ZAK, for offering us such a platform for interdisciplinary critical appreciation and discourse. I want to thank Professor Robertson-von Trotha for the concept of tonight and Dr. Christine Mielke for the organization of this event. And I wish you all an interesting, stimulating, and worthwhile evening. I look very much forward to the following talk by Professor Friedrich and the panel discussion with tonight's speakers, as well as the discussion with you, the whole audience. Thank you very much.
Dear guests, dear colleagues, let me also just welcome you very, very quickly and make a very few introductory remarks. I welcome you all to our critical appreciation of Fritz Haber. It has already been said, critical appreciation of Fritz Haber as a remarkable scientist and as a very good personified example of dilemmas we face in science? How do we set robust ethical borders and review them according to state-of-the-art knowledge? How do we recognize the inherent dangers of unethical behavior and the misuse of scientific endeavor? What can and must we do to recognize and organize limits to the constitutionally guaranteed freedom of science, without which, and make no mistake, I really believe this, without which constructive and innovative science could not exist? Fritz Haber gives us the opportunity to review and discuss what we as scientific institutions, as scientists and as citizens must learn, an ongoing process of retrospective and anticipatory balance. What do we and can we learn from history? My special thanks to Vice President Professor Alexander Wanner, to our cooperating partners, the Institute of Technology Futures, Professor Markus Poplov. Many thanks also to KIT Division 1, Biology, Chemistry and Process Engineering, and especially, of course, to Professor Doris Wedlich. Both will take part in the panel. And of course, welcome and most particular thanks to our keynote speaker, Professor Bretislav Friedrich, and to Professor Thomas Potthast. I will introduce slightly more length the speakers later. Professor Wanner has already introduced Haber, on the one hand, as an exceptional researcher and member of our university, but also in respect to his highly critical role as the father of chemical warfare. Intensive discussion on Haber, which some in the audience will remember, and others themselves were involved in, serve to demonstrate that we do at least partially learn our critical responsibility for authentic, objective, evidence-based collective memory and for lessons learned. Both the risk of interest-loaded selective representation and the relativization of context, or even simple forgetfulness, remain as ongoing challenges. On the anniversary of the beginning of the First World War, our center organized a 3-day international symposium within the Festival of European Culture in Karlsruher, 2014, Peace and War, with the provocative title, Still at War, From Poison Gas to Drones. You will find everything on our homepage and also in the YouTube presentations. Herfried Munkler was the opening keynote speaker, and we concluded with a broad interdisciplinary panel on ethics in science and military research. And I would like to point out that is not the theme we are looking at this evening. We are not talking about military research today. I only mention it because in this context, there was a broad discussion on Fritz Haber, which in Vorfeld had led to intensive, often heated debate and discussion involving various groups, both within the university and in the city, from our university archive to ASTA, from the academic faculties and councils, from the development and implementation of ethical guidelines for KIT, already finished and completed in 2012, from a debate in the city council to our public science events at ZAK, the 100th year anniversary of what is still often referred to as the Great War, served as a prism for critical reflection. In 2015, the selective and sometimes one-sided perception and representation of Fritz Haber as Nobel Prize winner was corrected here at KIT, and his other highly problematic action made visible. Responsible science requires both retrospective analysis and the anticipation of future unintended effects. Critical science necessarily requires inter- and transdisciplinary exchange. And of course, the relationship between science and society is not only essential, it has gained in importance. With the focus this evening on Fritz Haber, we will attempt to address the question of responsibility concentrating on the example of Fritz Haber. And now I may introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Bretislav Friedrich, who was born in Prague. He graduated from Karlsruher University in 1976 with a degree in physical chemistry. He then changed fields and earned his PhD in chemical physics in 1981 from the Czech Academy of Sciences. Subsequently, he was an Alexander von Humboldt Fellow at the Max Planck Institute for Strömungsforschung in Göttingen, Research Associate and later Senior Research Fellow and Lecturer at Harvard University, and since 2003, a research group leader at the Department of Molecular Physics at the Fritz Haber Institute of the Max Planck Society in Berlin. He is also an honorary professor at the Technical University of Berlin, and now we are very, very interested to hear what you are going to tell us. Many thanks indeed.